I'm going to be sharing with you about me. And hopefully some of that will be reflective upon your own self and ways that might be helpful. Darshan thought that this would be worth sharing, and so that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm talking about me. I'm not telling you how you're supposed to be. So that's a big difference. I'm not even asking you to be like me. That hasn't got anything to do with it. You draw from these things I'm going to say and share with you what you think might be important. And if they touch your heart and if they kind of make you think and whatnot, then great. That would be the only purpose of it, because all I'm doing is sharing about me. I'm telling you how I do it and how I think things can be done better, and so forth. So that's all I've got. So loosely, this is titled as things that project managers, supervisors, and people like that should know. Leadership is really what we're talking about. So let me just get into it and see where we are. I can take questions as it goes along. If someone wants to ask a question, we can do that. I will have a little exercise for us to do later on. I think that some copies of 4 or 5 pages have been passed out to you. Can someone give me a thumbs up that yes, that's something that we have? Okay, and so we will get to that shortly.
Van, two things. One is we have a lot of people who have joined in, and it's early morning. A lot of them might be in transit. So I suggest we do a Q&A right at the end, uh, instead of people asking through the way. And we've not been able to give out the handout. I saw that message
Oh,
quite early in the morning. So maybe that exercise we can do tomorrow, the
we
one with
can,
the handout.
sure, we can do that tomorrow. They can before they leave, you can give them a copy of it and they can fill it out overnight, and then we'll discuss it tomorrow.
Perfect. I will do that.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, so let's just move ahead then. So the things that I'm going to be talking about are communication skills, leadership skills, team management skills, negotiation skills, personal organization skills, and risk management skills. These are the sort of the chapters, are the main bullet points of how all of this comes down. And whether you are a company of one, like right now, I'm a consultant of one. I'm my own employee, and I still follow every single thing that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. So whether you are in charge of a company with 50,000 employees or whether you are a company of one, it doesn't matter. These are principles that I believe are still relevant. So here's some things about communication. Most of the time, it's my experience, and it's my personal experience as well, that about 90% of your management time is spent communicating in some form. It's essential that project managers can effectively convey vision, ideas, goals, issues, as well as produce reports, presentations, among other things. Whether it's phones and emails, today's world of social media is full of all kinds of ways to communicate. And sometimes we aren't very wise stewards with the amount of time that we spend communicating with one thing or another, or one person or another, or one entity or another. And we end up having to be very careful. I still remember when the first time that cell phones came along. That wasn't that many years ago when we didn't have cell phones. I was well into my career before we had computers and email and cell phones and things like that. And I still remember that when we had cell phones, I'd be on my cell phone and somebody would be talking to me and I'd be talking to them, but I wasn't looking at them. I was still looking at my phone. I was doing something on my phone and I didn't put it down. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around and face them and talk to them. And today it's gotten worse than ever. There are people that will be in the same room, they'll all have a phone, and they'll be texting each other, and they're sitting across from each other. They're not actually talking to each other. They're not actually communicating. Communicating is a lot more than what you can type with your fingers and your thumbs and on a computer. It is actually communicating. There's dialogue. There's some kind of interaction, and we as a culture, we as people, we don't do a very good job of that in our professional lives. We seem to send out an email and that was communication. We send out a blast and that was a communication. We type a blind social truth on TikTok or on something else, and that is our communication. But we didn't actually talk to anybody. We didn't actually see them. We didn't actually see how they respond to whatever it was we said. That is becoming a lost skill in a technical world. It's out of balance, and I challenge you to think about it a little more about how you communicate, knowing that you are communicating a lot, but how do you do it? Get back here. With leadership, if you can lead, then you can deliver on whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing with your company, with your customers, with your friends, with your family, with your business. But most importantly, leadership is often what is missing in a project manager's or as a boss or as in a CEO. It's missing in the project manager's arsenal of highly developed technical skills. Lots of people are not good communicators. I'm not talking about not being able to be understood. Language barriers. Right now, I know that depending on how well that each of you in India know a second or third or fourth language that might actually be English, there's only a certain amount of understanding that I know most of you are going to have listening to me. Hopefully you can see the words and keep up with me. I will be very difficult to understand the dialect and the accents and the questions that you might ask me. Sometimes it's very challenging for me to be able to understand what was just said and what you're actually asking. But we can try, we can do our best. That's not the kind of skill that I'm talking about. That's something that we learn as we finally get to know each other and develop better listening and understanding of languages and whatnot. It's the fact that you can communicate. There are lots of people that would like to be a teacher. They're in a teaching role. They've got to tell somebody how to do a job. They've got to tell somebody what was wrong. They have to tell somebody what their sales is going to be, how they're going to meet the customer's needs or whatever that it is. And if their life depended on it, they can't get it out of their head and out of their heart and into the minds of the people they're talking to. They cannot communicate. They're not able to lead. Some people say, well, I'm a leader. Are you? Well, then turn around and see if anybody's following. You can't just demand that people follow you. You can task them that. You can dictate it. You can be a dictator about it. But are they really following you, or why are they following you? When it comes to a team of people, whether it's for project manager or just team of people that are workers, you're a team of staff that are trying to solve a problem, a team of professionals in your community or whatever it is. There is no I. At least in English, when you spell the word team, there's no I. This isn't about you. This is about a team. There's no I in project management. None of those words have an I in them, meaning that I did this, I'm going to do that. This isn't about a one-man show. There's an acronym, we call it, for the word TEAM, that in English is that together everyone accomplishes more. And that's basically what a team is doing. You can, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people can do more than one person by themselves, no matter what it is. On the shop floor, or in any activity that you're doing, you can have 2 people that are working side by side, doing the same job at the same time all day long and whatever it is. And at the end of the day, they can add up that one of them did this much and the other one did that much. They both did about the same. If you stack that on top of each other, they were able to do this much product, this much results, whatever it was that they were doing. That's what they do. But they're working individually. This person is working individually and independent of this person. But if you take those 2 people and you combine them into a team working together on whatever it is that they were working on, almost every time without fail, the end result, as they help each other to be working with whatever it is that they're doing, and they work as a team on the same product, on the same process, whatever it is, at the end of the day, instead of having this much and this much, they'll end up with more than what the two of them did individually if they worked as a team. That it happens on almost everything, no matter what it is that you're working on. Besides leading a team from a strategic point of view, project managers, leaders, bosses, supervisors, owners, CEOs, they also need to manage from an operational point of view. Man, my goodness, an effective team manager and effective boss, they're going to excel. To be effective, that means they're going to be good at administrating and coordinating groups of individuals. They're going to promote teamwork. They're going to be delegating tasks. They're going to be resolving conflict. They're going to be setting goals and evaluating performance. And most of that does not include them doing the work, because it has to be delegated. It has to be done by other people. Somehow they have to be trained. And that doesn't just happen. That doesn't happen by itself. There's things that have to be done there. And so part of the negotiating of being a leader is building on communication skills. You have to have some. If you don't have good ones, then you have to work on that. An important aspect of a good communicator has to do with negotiating the use of resources, budgets, schedules, creep, scope, the variety of other compromises that are simply unavoidable. Knowing how to negotiate well so that all the parties are satisfied is a very key skill set for a successful manager, a successful boss, a successful seller, a successful marketing person. Just fill in the blank. If you're going to be good at whatever it is that you do, then you've got to be able to handle whatever parts of these fit into your company and find ways to actually improve those things. It's been said that you cannot give what you don't have. So, okay, so if you're a leader and you're needing to give instruction, needing to give something, if you don't have the skills to be able to do that, you can't give it. So though you need to know where your weak spots are. We'll be getting to that soon. How can you get things done and organize work for other people if your own personal life and your projects are disorganized and going nowhere? Most of you probably know what 5S is. It's a concept of trying to be organized, have things that every place has a thing and everything is in its place. And we manifest that in several ways on the shop factory floor. There might be lines that are painted on the floor. This is where the trash can goes, and other lines over here. This is where the forklift goes, and this is where bins go, and things are in a place, and we keep them organized. And that works well in factories. If you were in my house right now and you were to go through my clothes drawer where my socks are, they're organized. If you went through my closet where my shirts are, they're organized. They're not laying around all over the place. If you went into my shop where my tools are and my equipment and my things, it's organized. I don't try to make everybody else be organized. I am organized. I make myself be organized. My kitchen is organized. I mean, there's a point at which if you don't do it for yourself, you are almost hypocritical to try and demand that somebody else do it. And so I lead by example. I am organized. My thoughts are organized. My files are organized. My consulting business is organized in many ways. If you get organized personally, then you will immediately improve as a project manager. I guarantee it. If you are sloppy with your own self and your own house and your own things and your own shop, your vehicle is dirty and full of stuff where you've just thrown trash in the floorboard, you're probably going to be managing that way also in some form. You'll be struggling to keep things organized and keep up with things. It's my opinion. And all of you are welcome to your opinion, especially, as I say, if you want to be wrong. So another aspect is the risk management side of things. If you can predict and create solutions to issues before they arise, then you increase your chances of delivering projects or products or results successfully. I don't mean like in a crystal ball as though we're seeing the future. It's simply projecting what could go wrong. How do I plan for either using my experience or anything else? How do I use what I know, what I've learned, what I can discover to be prepared for what might, for partially prepared for as much as I know as it comes down the road. When we are quoting a job, this is a rubber industry thing, but when we're quoting a job for how much something is going to cost, how much rubber we're going to need, how much manpower we're going to need, how long will a cure cycle be, in order to predict that for this amount of cost that I'm going to sell to my customer, I can make money on making this many parts in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of labor input, certain amount of direct use of product. We make assessments like that, and that's in essence a part of risk management right there. Because if we're wrong and we didn't calculate correctly about how much raw material we need, we're suddenly putting money into every box, into every part that we ship to the customer. If we guessed wrong, if we didn't correctly identify how much people, manpower that we needed for the job, then we're going to be in trouble as we go. If we guessed wrong that the amount of parts we could make at any one time or in any period of time was less than what was needed to make money, you're in trouble. And so we have to be able to sometimes predict what it might be and then compensate for it with a little bit of contractor factor of some kind to hedge our bet, to be ready for, okay, if we can't do that, then what can we do? How can we make a plan? And so risk by definition, just by definition, they're not necessarily urgent. It's as a result, many project managers fail to even consider risk as a task. We just quote stuff, we just plan to do something, we send people out on this task or that task, and we don't often look far enough down the road for what really should we have been looking for. Then suddenly our risk management is reactionary instead of proactive. So a lot of the things that we do as managers, if we're not careful, we are reacting to one thing after another, and we never get enough time, or we never even think about it far enough ahead to be proactive in what we might be planning to do, to plan ahead, which kind of brings me to this. I got my letters a little big and I didn't get them on the paper very good. And so I should have shortened the text or done something to get them all on there without that. But in real life, that's sort of what we do. We spend a lot of time playing around, trying to fit ourselves into the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Whereas if we could just have gone back a little bit and planned ahead, and sometimes it's things that we actually knew better to do, and we forgot. We didn't take a moment to think a little bit out of the box or in front of the box. Here's some things that I think people in any business probably need to know, especially in rubber. So this maybe is a little more rubber related, but if you're designing products and trying to provide something for a customer and whatnot that's being built, whatever it is, it's important to know something about what I call the 75% fixed cost principle. We'll explain that in a moment. It's important to understand the 90-90 principle. I'll explain that. It's important to consider contingency plans just in case of, in English, what we call Murphy's Law. I don't know if you have Murphy's Law in India or not, but we'll talk about that guy. And then there's a recommendation on my part to practice the principles of critical chain management, and I'll talk about what those are. So to begin with, here's the 75% cost principle. In most applications of most things, especially product design, mold design, tool design, processes, activities, the cost of building a building, a house, building a car, it almost doesn't matter. Once you have pressed save on your design, once you have taken the pencil off the paper and said, this is what I want, this is what we need, this is what's going to be involved with it, at that moment, as much as 75% of the actual cost of doing whatever that is fixed and unchangeable. Now, where this comes into a problem is that, let's suppose that you're going to design a part, or you're going to design a mold and a process to make a part. The moment that as you sit around the table with your team or individually in your head and you say, okay, I'm going to use this process and this method to make this part, that moment that you have set that, 75% of the cost of actually making that part is fixed and there's nothing you can do about it. Only 25% of it or less is actually able to be variable and something you can adjust to reduce your cost. Okay, well, that's a problem because now a year down the road, 6 months down the road, whenever it is, and you have to reduce cost or you're going to lose the job because your customer is demanding a lower cost or something is going to happen. You've only got a small percentage of it that you can actually change. The only real way that you can actually make a dramatic change in cost reduction is to go back to the beginning and come up with a new plan. That the new plan itself is more cost effective. You can't just change the one you have. You can change it a little, but you usually can't change much of it at all because so much of it is automatically fixed. For those of you in the rubber industry that are on this thing, for instance, if you decided I'm going to use a compression mold to make this part and I'm going to have 24 cavities in it, well, you're stuck right there because you can put it in a bigger press, but that doesn't have more cavities. You can put more cavities in the mold, but you don't have a press. You can try to mold things faster, but you're in a compression press. You can't keep up with the schedule that's in an injection press. So if you want to actually make dramatic cost improvements, you've got to go back to the beginning and say, okay, I don't need a compression mold with 24 cavities. I need an injection mold with 50 cavities or whatever. But you got to start all the way back over to find a different cost-effective model. And then when you settle on that, that one's fixed at 75% of whatever that is and unchangeable. But that's how you end up having to look at things if they're going to do that. A reduction in the eventual cost of a product usually means that you've got to have a brand new plan, not just simply cost cutting. You can't just simply let people go. You can't get a whip out and say you got to work faster. That is very minor in the big scheme of things, very minor improvements to cost reduction. You can't get there from here. The 90-90 principle. If you don't know about this, you'll know what it is when you hear it. The first 90% of the time required to complete a project requires the first 90% of the time of the scheduled project. The other 10% of the projected time requires the other 90% of the time to complete the project. Example, let's suppose that you want to build a building. You want to build something and it said, we're gonna need 6 months to build this building. Well, the first 90% of that project is going to go along just fine. And about 5 months into it, it's almost going to be done. But the other 10% will take another 4 or 5 months, and it'll be late. It'll take longer than you think it should. If you're talking about money, most of the time we think it's going to cost $1 million. Well, the first $900,000 really went along fine, and the other the $100,000 you needed ends up being almost another $1 million. It takes longer. It takes more to complete things. And some projects go along fine. They complete when they're supposed to and on budget. Most things don't. If you are making a report, how long do you think it'll take to make that report? I think I can have it done in 2 weeks. Well, 3 weeks later, you're probably still about 90% done and still working on the other 10%. Things happen like that. I mean, it's almost a fact of law that we can't get away from. It doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot. And the 90-90 principle is something that as a manager, as a leader, we need to be aware of it ourselves in whatever we're committing to when we give a estimate of what it's going to cost us to do and an estimate of how much time that it's going to take. We need to be aware of that from our own selves and set our strategy for responses accordingly without being overly compensating for it. And at the same time, as leaders, when we're asking other people to do things, we need to be aware that that's probably going to happen to them also. And yet then we can get mad, and because it didn't happen when they said it would happen or when we asked for it to happen, it cost more than we wanted. And there's a reality here that we kind of need to be aware of. And the better you understand the 90-90 principle, oftentimes the less disappointed and fractured that you'll be with whatever you're seeing as results. Murphy's Law is the original Murphy's Law. There was actually a person named Murphy. The actual original person named Murphy was a test pilot in the Air Force of the United States, and he was testing a flight that it went wrong. He survived it, but it went wrong, and so Murphy's Law came out of that, where that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's just how it came. And then there's derivatives of Murphy's Law that continue to flash out all over the place over the last 50 years. So there's a corollary law that if it can go wrong, it will do so at the worst possible time. And so for those of us in manufacturing, that usually means that on the day that we need the most product for our best customer to be gone out and get there is the day that somehow the power goes out and there's a storm and our employees are sick and the press broke, and at the worst possible time that something could go wrong, that's when it will go wrong. That often happens. I mean, it's just a fact of life as things do that. And so there's almost nothing you can do to stop it from happening. You can plan ahead as much as you want, but you can't stop these things. There's almost no way to get away from it. However, as we look at how the timelines and cost lines and things like that, there's a book that is related to that is very helpful in management, and it's called A Critical Chain. It would be available on Amazon, on Google somewhere. It's by a fellow named Dr. Eli Goldratt. He also wrote another good book called The Goal. I highly recommend both of those books to managers, to leaders, to CEOs. This isn't for your rank and file. This is for the folks that are up on the top rung of the ladder. If you are in charge of people and your people are in charge of more people and those people are in charge of somebody else, and there's dollars involved in raw materials, and there's output that's required for getting things done and through the shop and whatnot. If you're in charge of a project that has a lot of different facets in it, then you will get something out that's very useful and informative from the critical chain. And I highly recommend it. The idea is that somebody needs to be able to control and take responsibility of the allotment of safety in time. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say, for instance, that there are 4 of you that are responsible for 4 different facets of some kind of project. And Darshan is in charge of the project, and the 4 of you are going to be trying to help him get it done. One of you works, I'll just use a rubber company example. One of you is in charge of a machine shop where molds are going to be made. And one of you is in charge of production on the shop floor. And one of you is in charge of the raw material, making it to the shop. And one of you is in charge of mixing the compound. And then there's somebody else that's in charge of shipping and quality and inspection. You get the idea. There's 4 or 5 people that are involved in these things. So here's a new product. Here's a new thing that comes in. Darshan and Jay are excited about it. They've got a customer that wants this product, and there's a certain time that they need to have it. And you're trying to figure out, okay, how can we get this done? And so Darshan goes to one of you and says, okay, well, we need this mixing compound. How soon can you get me a sample of the compound so that we can try it? And so because you don't want to disappoint him, you say, well, in a week, I can get it in a week. And so Darshan says, what's your level of confidence that you can get it to me in a week? It's 100%. Okay, fine. So then he asks you, what's your level of confidence that you can get it to me in 3 days? Your eyes go big. Maybe only 75%. Darshan says, I'll take it. And if you need another day, come back to me for it, but I want it in 3 days. Your safety was that you were saying, I can get it to you in a week. Because you know you can get it to him in a week. You're not as sure you can get it to him in 3 days. You might, I mean, boy, if you put the screws to it, you get to 3 days. And Darshan, I need another day. We can't get it today. We'll get it to you tomorrow. And Darshan says, okay. So what he just did was that the thing that was going to take a whole week of time, if he lets you have that, you know how much time that you'll need? A whole week of time. You're going to use every bit of it. And the safety that was perhaps instead of 3 days, instead of 7 days, get my fingers here just right, before you can see them on the phone. 5, and 7. Okay. So instead of you saying I got 7 days, he says I want it in 3. And you get to 3 and says, well, I need another day. And so he gives it to you. Well, instead of 7, you did it in 4. That means Darshan has 3 days of safety that he kept to himself for the project. Because the next person who's going to do something with this material said, when you get the material, how long is it going to take you to run a sample, get a rheometer, and do things like that? And you're going to say 2 days. Once I get the material, 2 days. Darshan says, well, if you get it in the morning, can you have it for me in the afternoon of the same day? Maybe, you know. And so now he's trying to take the safety of that 1 day. You could have another couple of hours if you need it, but he's trying to. Darshan is trying to be the controller of the safety for every single facet. And so by going through each person in charge of these different things, whenever they get whatever it is they're supposed to be doing, there's an estimate that they're going to be not comfortable with. Here's the safety, man. I can do it in 2 weeks. I can get you a mold in 3 weeks, but I don't think I can get it in 1 week. I'll try, but I can't get it in 1 week. And sure enough, you can't get it in 1 week. It's a week and a half. But the other week and a half is now part of the safety. So by one person controlling the safety, the chain of events happening from process to process, the critical path of the project is, instead of being this really long cumulative safety of everybody, is collapsed to this, and it turns over faster. It takes attention. It takes deliberate steps of leadership. It takes deliberate steps on the part of the people in those various facets to be guided and matured to the point that they can respond to that kind of leadership. You can't just simply dump this on somebody and demand things to happen, because it doesn't work that way. They have to buy into this concept and understand how it's working so that they can give you correct assessments of their level of confidence that they can be able to do something. And so that takes training that's throughout the organization with the leaders of the people that are in charge of various aspects of things. Sometimes one of your critical chains is a customer. It's a supplier. That you're not their boss. You're just their customer, and you can ask them, how soon can you get this for me? And they say, well, we'll get it to you. They give you a quote of time, just like you give one to your customer, and they say, well, it'd be 4 weeks. And you say, well, can I get it in 3? And they might just say no. I mean, sometimes there's only so much you can do with people that do not report to you, that are not in your control of activities, because sometimes those suppliers are a massive company, and you're a small part of their customer list, and you don't have a lot of pull with them. There's only so much you can do. So you pick and choose where that you can actually apply elements of critical chain management. Management assessment. This is, how do you manage? How well do you do this? There are subtle differences when we manage, when we lead. Words like manager, leader, coach, supervisor, mentor, or in my case, tormentor. There are subtle differences in these words of how you lead other people. And so we'll talk about some of these as to they're similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're similar. At any one time, you're allowed to be doing any one of them. At any given time, managers, leaders, CEOs, bosses, supervisors may be called upon to provide training, coaching, leadership, mentoring, supervision, etc. How well do you do that? Are you even capable of doing that? If you're in a position that you need to be doing that, it's worth being able to do that to be effective. A person may be better at one or more of these activities and not necessarily good at all of the disciplines, and that's okay. So when I go back and look at this list, sometimes, now I'm talking about me, sometimes I may have to manage people. That's very different than managing things. There are some people that are terrible managers of people, but they're excellent managers of things. And our responsibility as managers is to sometimes be able to sort out the two and put people in positions where they can manage things rather than managing people. Some people just are not good managers of people, but that doesn't make them a bad manager. They can manage things. Sometimes we have to lead. meaning that I can't just tell people that this is where they need to go and what they need to be doing. It's follow me, that me be the example of what we're doing or what I need you to do. And so I need to be a leader. That's hard for some people. They would much rather just go do, go do, go, you go do it. And they have no intention of actually also being there. As a consultant, as an engineer, people person, a doer. I have in the rubber industry, I've got scars, and I call them tattoos. I got scars all over me where I've been touching things that are hot. I'm on the shop floor. The people that worked for me in the companies that I've worked for before, it didn't take them long to forget and that I was also their supervisor. The line of leadership definitely went from them to me. But I was in there with them. I was working with them. I wasn't necessarily one of them, but I was working with them. A coach, that from when you have cricket, most of the time your coach is not the one that's out there on the pitch. That's sort of not the way it works. But they're involved. And if he was out there, he's not. If he ever played, he's not as good probably as any of the one that's the players that are out there. So you don't have to be, as a coach, you don't have to even be able to know how to do anything. You just need to know how to coach. You need to be able to recognize how to improve the skills of someone else. Be able to, we call it sometimes, coach them up. We need to be able to bring out the skills that are in someone that we may see that they don't even realize they have it themselves in it. Sometimes we're just a flat out supervisor. We have a list of things. These are assignments, and you get this, you get that, you do this. This is the order you do them in. You're going to be doing this first, and then this, then that. Change this mold, do this work, and whatnot. That's a typical supervisor. But it doesn't have to be so cut and dried all the time. There can be some pleasantries as far as being communication again, back with how those assignments are passed out so that they're done a little better. And I use the example sometimes that if you had a dessert, some kind of ice cream, maybe that you like, maybe you like a vanilla ice cream or something, and I could have a bowl of vanilla ice cream and hand it to you, and it would taste good and you would enjoy it. I could also take the bowl of vanilla ice cream and smash it in your face. It would taste the same, but you wouldn't enjoy it. And so sometimes the way that we give out assignments, to just be able to thrust the assignments into whatever they're doing, they might have been able to willingly do them and whatnot, but suddenly it's not enjoyable the way that was handled, the way that it was delivered from the supervision point of view. And so for me, I try to be much more accommodating when I'm handing out instructions, especially when they're instructions that I know are hard, and there's not much time and there's not much wiggle room, and this is what you have to do, and this is what you have to do it with. And but if I can't help them do it, man, all I can do is pass it along. And these are the rules. This is the day. This is the assignment, and this is what we have to do. Sometimes you're a mentor. If you don't know that word, it means that you are teaching, you are guiding, you are being an example for someone else. Today, I am mentoring. That's what I'm doing right now. If each of you were my subject to improve, this is a virtual mentorship, but if I was actually with you, and with the respect to Jay and Darshan, I am a mentor for them. I have been a mentor for them for a long time, and they are improved in their management and their skills and their communication and their leadership. I think it's in spite of me, but we have had that type of relationship for many years, as we would work together, and then sometimes we're actually doing consulting to actually do technical things also. But there's a mentorship, or as I call it, a tormentorship. It's a different word that sort of means the same. Sometimes if someone is having a hard time with the training and the example. So at any time, a supervisor, leader, boss, CEO, owner, whatever, may have to provide any one of those types of skills to anybody at any time. And the tables get turned sometimes where you are mentoring or coaching or leadership someone that's above you, not just someone that reports to you. You may be going up the direction with these skills, and sometimes that's necessary and helpful at the same time. I think that managers and leaders should know their own strengths and weaknesses. I believe that I know mine. I think that we need to know what we are good at. I think I know what I'm good at. I think that we need to be able to recognize areas that we need to improve. And so how do you do that? If you just as you're thinking in your own mind as best as you understand what you're reading and what I've just said, you probably know things that you're good at, areas that you're good at, and maybe some other areas that you're not so good at. You've had confrontations with employees. You've felt embarrassed about doing this. You've not been a good leader. You've not been a good trainer. Or there are other wonderful examples where that you found a diamond in the rough and you educated them, and they're now out there on their own and working to be a leader themselves. As they get promoted up through the organization, and you know that you were a part of that because you helped them to be able to learn what they were doing and do it better, and now they're being recognized for it. And those are things that make you feel good when you see someone else that you've worked with do good and become better at what they're doing. A leader knows the way, shows the way, goes that way, even if no one follows. Now that's a little tough. There's another thing that comes up a little later, that even if no one is following, can you still lead? You should be able to say yes. You should be able to say yes, because just because you tell people that you're in charge of them or that you're going to be a leader doesn't actually mean they will recognize your position in a community, in a family, in a workplace, in a group. It doesn't always just go the way you think it should just because you are the leader or the boss. It's because you are the owner. Doesn't mean that all of this happens all the time. We need to work on our own skills to know the way, show that way, go that way, even if no one follows, at least at first. Hard thing to grasp and get a hold of. We have a thing that we see in the movies and whatnot. It's where someone sticks a plate on top of a pole and starts spinning the plate. And some people, some magicians and whatnot, man, they're able to, or they're juggling, the juggling balls, they're spinning plates. This is something they're doing physically to try to keep these plates spinning. And if you think about it from the standpoint of, okay, I'm in charge. I've got a lot to do. I'm going to run my company. In fact, nobody can do anything in the company better than me, faster than me. If I let somebody else do it, I'm going to have to come in behind them and fix it and do it myself. It's easier for me to just go ahead and do it myself than to try and get somebody else to do it. We have all kinds of different versions of that. And so, sure enough, in your responsibility of roles of whatever it is that you're doing and you think you must do at home, in the community, in your company, in your job, in your whatever it is, you can keep up with a couple of responsibilities very well. Most people are pretty successful at that. Take on a few more responsibilities, and it's being there's some really good folks out there that can actually do a lot of things. They can multitask, man. They can do it. And you're always going to be, whatever your responsibilities are, you're always going to keep doing whatever you do on your cell phone and your social media. We're not going to get rid of that. We're going to keep doing something. At some point, it starts being a challenge. When you take on these responsibilities and you're trying to do it yourself, at some point in the growth of a business or whatnot, you can't keep them. You're going to lose control. You're going to lose control of yourself. Your ability for time management is going to completely come unglued, and you'll be too busy. You just are not going to be able to take care of it. You will lose control. It's more than you can do, and suddenly everything's broken. A lot of things are broken. Something just is, it's just wrong, and you've got a mess that you got to clean up. The only way that you can continue to respond with growth is you've got to train people to be plate spinners. You've got to be able to delegate. You've got to be able to train. You've got to be able to let go of some things, whatever those things might be. And if you cannot let go, then you should not be growing in your responsibility. Simple as that. Downstream from you, everybody is not going to be delegating, but there are people underneath you that you can delegate to, and they can delegate. You have to be the mentor, the coach, the leader, the supervisor, the trainer, to be able to develop people who can keep a couple of things spinning so that you don't have to be doing everything, because at some point it's too much for you to be able to do, and you are not going to be able to survive that. I'd like to take a quick break for a moment. I'll come right back and we'll start right here. So maybe 5 minutes, and we'll return to right here if that's okay. Europe. The people in Europe tend to have a better handle on time management of what they're doing. I find that the people in the US get a little bit slack, and it depends on people that are basically, say, 40 years and older are much more conscious of time and other people's time and getting things done. And people that are younger than 40 don't have the same sense of time or the same commitment to doing things right. And that may be prevalent in a number of countries as well. I find that people who own companies, entrepreneurs, they have a much better control of time. And if you lead with time management, other people will fall into that improvement as well. All right, well, let's move along if everyone is ready. This next section, we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to do anything about it. Before you leave from wherever you are from Darshan's place, he's going to get a copy of this to you. I've sent a separate file to him that he can either email to you or print out and give you. This is a personal assessment. And so what I'm going to do is show you things that have a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being poor and 5 being best. And there are different types of characteristics about management and leadership and relationships that you assess yourself on as to whether you think you are good at this, medium at this, or bad at this, 1 to 5. And you're gonna take this home, and tomorrow we'll talk about it. I don't think we'll go through the steps of saying, okay, well, how did you score? It's a personal thing, but you'll understand what's involved with it. And so I use this as what I call a litmus test in order to assess myself. And when I'm asked to help a company to evaluate a critical employee hire for a management position, I'll have them do this assessment. And usually I'm doing it with them. I'm asking them questions about how they are in this particular aspect of each one of these characteristics. And then if they have a really low score, they just sort of maybe rank themselves out of that opportunity. If they have a high score, well, then we start seeing where there's good points, strong points, and weak points that will either align or they don't align with whatever the job is that we want that person to be able to do. And so here's what it looks like. Get back over here. There's 4 or 5 pages of this kind of thing. And so you would ask yourself, if I was me, am I an effective, proven follower? And the principle is that a good leader is someone that has been a good follower of others. Have you been a good follower? I believe, this is my opinion, I believe that if you are not a good follower, you cannot be a good leader. I believe that if you, it could go down with teaching, same way. If you are not a good student, you're probably not a good teacher. It kind of goes hand in hand with that. So here's the premise: is that have you, in your opinion of yourself, have you been a good follower? And so you give yourself a grade, a score. 4 is 1. I'm not a good follower. I don't follow anybody. I follow people on TikTok, but that's not what I'm talking about. So you assess yourself. Do you have a positive attitude? Or are you one of those people, well, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? All right, that's a 3. Whichever way you go, that's a 3. And so some people are just, they're just down in the mouth. They're not happy about anything. Everything's going wrong. Nobody likes me. I can't do anything. I don't. The sun came up today, but somewhere else it's not here. And whatever. Some people just have a very non-positive attitude, and some people are very positive about anything. No matter what it is. They stepped in some horse manure. Oh, great. I wonder where the horse is. Let's see where the horse is. You can't even get them unhappy from that standpoint. So do you have a positive attitude? Life brings a series of good times and bad times, up times, down times, successes, failures. A good leader will maintain a positive outlook and attitude no matter what circumstances may come. Doesn't mean you're going to be happy about them, but you got to be positive about it, because there's a way to get through it. There's a way to get past it. There's a way to come out on the other side. At least you hope, and you have a positive attitude about that. Honest with integrity. Honesty means that you're not hiding behind a mask of alternative agendas. It means that you have integrity, means that you can be trusted with whatever it is that you have, whatever it is that you're saying, whatever it is that you're doing. If you are genuine, authentic in everything you do, then it will show and be on display in your business culture and your leadership, as opposed to being a hidden agenda of some kind, where that's going to show too. And so are you honest? Do you have integrity in what you do, what you say, and how you act? 1 to 5. Ethical behavior. These are, you may not have gotten up this morning wondering, how can I use the word ethical in a sentence? That's okay. I don't know how it translates into Indian language and culture, but there may be actions that someone can do which are perfectly legal, but they may not be the right thing to do. Ethical situations, ethical actions are the right thing to do, even if there are other options that are not so ethical. A good leader does what is right, even when they think that they are alone and no one is aware or watching them. That's being ethical. Not doing right just because someone's watching you, but when nobody's watching you, when nobody knows what you're doing, are you doing the right thing? That is ethical. Is that what you do? How would you grade yourself on that? Transparency means that you do not lead with a hidden agenda. This is kind of back to the honest with integrity. You don't wear a mask to hide your real intentions. You're not trying to treat people one way because you have a separate agenda behind it in order to trap them or mislead them in some way, or to hide what your intentions are. Are you transparent? Self-confidence. If a person has self-confidence in themselves, then others will be more likely to have confidence in them as well. In contrast, if a person doesn't have self-confidence, then others will be less likely to have confidence toward them. So you end up with people who say, here's something you need to do, and man, I don't know if we can do this or not. You know, this is probably going to fail. This is going to be a disaster to get done, or I don't think we can accomplish this. Well, what do you expect the people that you're trying to direct and lead? How do you expect them to feel when that's what you're portraying? That's what you feel. If you have confidence in what you're doing, it becomes contagious. Contagious is one of those things, like some people say, and I'm sorry to have to do this, but if you're sleepy and you start yawning or something like that, it's not long before everybody else in the group, somebody's out there yawning right now because I did. If you have a smile, laughter, laughter is somewhat contagious if you have it. And so it's not always as easy as, but truly laughter is contagious. So is self-consciousness. If you are confident, it is contagious to the people that you're trying to lead. And it goes a long ways. Self-discipline. Yikes. This is back to time management in many ways. It's part of it. A good leader practices and demonstrates doing the things that need to be done, not just the things they want to do. Ugh. It's the reason we have servants. It's the reason we have workers. It's the reason we have somebody else to clean the toilet. It's the reason we have someone else to mop. It's the reason I'm not going to do that. I want somebody to do something for me. A good leader practices and demonstrates doing the things that need to be done, not just the things they want to do. Sometimes we can delegate things, and we definitely should. But sometimes we just there's some things we need to do, and we should have the self-discipline to be able to do them. Time management, that subject that came up. A good leader is going to demonstrate consistent, keyword, continuous time management practices, whatever those are. They will also be mindful of other people's efforts to exercise their own time management. If your time management is poor, then you're going to waste a lot of people's time management on their own, because you're wasting their time by your lack of ability to have time management. So time management is something a leader has got to lead by example, must demonstrate by example. You can't just tell people to have good time management. It's not going to happen. Assess yourself on that, 1 to 5. Walk like you talk. I wrote a song sounded something like that. You got to walk like you talk, squiggle like you walk, do what you say, practice what you pray. Any way you want to say it. It's one thing to just tell people to do things, and yet you're doing something completely different. We use I used to use the example with my kids. You don't need to be smoking. Smoking can cause cancer. Or stop smoking. It's ridiculous if I'm smoking, trying to tell someone else to stop smoking. That's what that means. I mean, don't just tell other people what they need to be. Lead them by example. Do what you say. Walk like you talk. A good leader will demonstrate consistent time management, but they'll also be careful of other people's time. That's part of it. A good leader will lead by example, demonstrating the principles of do as I do, not the principle of do as I say. Now, when I learned to drive a car as a teenager, my mother was the one that was tasked with the responsibility of teaching me to drive, put me in the family vehicle, and we would go driving on the road somewhere. And if she told me once, she told me 100 times, do as I say, not as I do. She was a terrible driver. And so I sort of almost had to learn to drive by not driving the way she did. It was just because she didn't do what she said and what she wanted me to do. She'd tell me to be sure and use the turn signal. She didn't use the turn signal. She would tell me to slow down slow down a lot before I got to the stop sign. Yet she would get to the stop sign and go, and come to a stop most of the time. She was a terrible driver, bless her heart. I loved her to death. But I remember her telling me many times, do as I say, not as I do. That is not a good leadership practice. That is, and sometimes we don't even come close to ever saying that, but our actions speak louder than our words. When we tell other people to do something and we aren't doing it, you are screaming, do as I say and not as I do. You need to be able to inspire others, and you can assess yourself, is there anything I do that inspires other people? Some people say that they're self-made. I don't really believe there's any such thing as that. Rather, they're driven. Something and or someone has inspired them. A good leader will endeavor to inspire others to be driven. You find an entrepreneur, you find a good leader, you find someone that's got this characteristic about them, something, somebody, somewhere. They may have seen it on TV, they may have seen it in an interview, they may have known somebody, could have been their father, could have been a friend. Somebody has influenced them in some way to either not be like that or to be like what they are. I could give you a story of when I was a new engineer in a research department right out of college, and we were working on patents. This was actually some of the first patents that I was ever able to work on. I've got 70 something patents now. And so my first 3 patents do not have my name on them, because the engineer that I was working alongside with, I was supposedly his apprentice of sorts. I found out over years, 3 different times, that he filed a patent on work that I was doing with him or for him, and he took credit for it and didn't give my name on the patent, so I didn't get credit for it. And I went to my boss after the second time, and I asked my boss, who was the director of the department, that this had happened, and he said, well, I'll make sure that that doesn't happen again. And about 6 months later, it did happen again. And I went back to my boss and I said, this is the 3rd time that this has happened, that this guy has taken credit for my work and gotten a patent for the company, and my name is not included on the patent, but it should have been. And my boss said, did I give you did I give you that in writing? And I said, well, no, there's something you said right here in this office. You're in that chair and I was in this chair. He said, well, if I didn't give you something in writing, it didn't happen. I walked out of that office down a long hallway back to my office in absolute disbelief. And I was inspired with a commitment that I still remember as though it was yesterday instead of 50 years ago, that if I ever get a chance to manage technical people and engineers, I will not do it this way. And as far as I can tell, of all the other promises I've made to myself, I've kept that one. I learned something about managing technical, creative people poorly by his example, and I was inspired to do it different. And I have taught myself and learned from others and other examples how to not be that kind of leader. That was an inspiration for me in a very negative way. But most of the time, we also have good people of influence that we can follow. Something inspires us. And as a leader, wow, is there anything about what you do that inspires others? You may not know the answer to that, and that's okay, because it takes some kind of feedback that we can't ask for it. I've lived 70 years and had the opportunity to be in charge of a lot of people and influence a lot of people in a lot of different platforms. And occasionally I get a feedback response where that someone lets me know that something I wrote, something I taught, something I said, something I did with them or around them inspired them and helped them and promoted them in some way that I probably was not aware of at the time. This is not one of those things that you may ever know about yourself, but you can at least ask yourself from that standpoint, is there anything I'm doing? Am I living my career? Am I doing what in any way that might be inspiring to someone in a positive way? You may not know, but you probably would know if there was something you were doing that was just the opposite of inspiring. You probably know that. And if you're heavy in that article, that would be a poor thing to do. Commitment and passion. I believe that good leaders are never satisfied with the level of success that is achieved. They desire to improve, push to do better. Passion extends to seeking ways to help others improve themselves. I like improving myself, but man, it just does something to my heart to actually see someone else improved with anything that I do. As a teacher, it's the same way. I love seeing someone's eye, the eyes light up when they realize that, oh, that's what that means. Oh, I needed that. I didn't know that. Or connect the dots of something that actually relates to whatever it is that they're doing. There's nothing in the world as a teacher that thrills you more than that, than for someone to get it. And you don't ever know what it is that they're going to get. You have no idea what might actually inspire them, what actually might have touched them right where they are with whatever it is that they know. We seldom, as teachers and as things like that, we seldom know that. Sometimes we do, and that's a great thing to be able to have that awareness when that happens to someone. But you've got to have compassion, you've got to have commitment, you've got to have passion. As an entrepreneur, that's the whole idea behind entrepreneurs. They're trying to develop something. They're always trying to make continuous improvement. We've got our mission statements in the plant that always usually has something in it, that we're driven to give highest quality, best results, continually improve. I mean, we have those words in there, and for most companies, they're absolutely meaningless because they don't actually follow them. But for a lot of people, man, we really do want to improve. There's only so much we can do because 75% of whatever it is we're doing is fixed and not even changeable. But overall, we're trying to actually find incremental little steps to improve. We're trying to improve the growth of the company, the number of people, the capabilities of the people. This is an overarching umbrella of trying to be able to be not satisfied with where we are and what you're doing. We want to, even if it's, we just want to I want to be better. I want to learn more. It's amazing what I don't know. Unbelievable. I'm still learning. I'm still working on patents. I'm still developing things. I'm still making programs for teaching and assignments and writing books. This week today, here is the 11th chapter of my next book on compression molding. And tonight, after this presentation is finished, and tomorrow morning, my time, I'll be pressing send for the final print-ready copy for Param and Technobiz in Bangkok, Thailand, to begin printing this next book on compression molding. I'm continuing to write. I'm continuing to learn. I'm continuing to research. I'm not done with me. Someone asked me, are you ever going to retire? Well, yeah. Probably about 2 seconds before my last breath. Until then, I'll be trying to continue to improve, continuing to teach, continuing to lead, continuing to be an example with every bit of my being that I possibly can. That doesn't mean I'm always working. I've got to take some time for myself. I've got to take some time for my wife. I've got to take some time with my grandchildren. But woven all into that is the continuation of what I do for the industry and for myself and the activities that I have. Generosity. Last thing on this page. You assess yourself as whether or not you have generosity. A good leader will be generous with their time, their resources, their skills, their knowledge, because they know everyone in a collective whole is the beneficiary when they can be built up and grow as individuals. I'm doing that right now with you. I do that frequently with Darshan and Jay. I do that with my other clients. I do it across the industry as a whole, just in the rubber side of things. But I do it with other things. I try to be generous with what I have, what I know, and with my time. This isn't just giving money away. I'm generous with that too. Generosity comes in a lot of different forms, and that's application and personally specific to you. Are you generous? There's more. When you assess yourself as whether or not you're a strong communicator. If people are not aware of your expectations and they fall short, then it's actually somewhat your fault for not expressing it to them in a way that they could fully understand. We as leaders and supervisors and managers, we are quick to come down on people sometimes because they didn't meet our expectations. And lots of times it's partially our fault because we didn't express what we were talking about. I don't know how many of you are married, but you probably, if you're married and or if you've watched married couples, you'll know that guys frequently are terrible communicators with wives. There's the expectations though the wives have. They say something, blah, blah, blah. We don't get it. They want us to do something, blah, blah, blah. We didn't hear it. We have selective hearing when it comes to that. And we get in trouble all the time. We try to tell our wives something and they have no idea what we're talking about. There's a miscommunication, a failure to communicate. If that can happen with the one that you live with, then imagine how frequent it happens with someone that you're just working with on a. So when you assess yourself as whether or not you're a good communicator, strong communicator, clear communicator, for those of you that are married, forget about work. Just tell me, answer it based on your relationship with your wife. Otherwise, I mean, but that's going to give you a good idea of how you might be a communicator or not. To be decisive, a decisive direction that you can give, even if it comes out wrong, being decisive. It's better to have a decisive directive and decision and be wrong, completely wrong, than it is to be wishy-washy in your decisions, even if it turns out to be right. A decisive direction that you're giving is straightforward and creates confusion and interaction. Wishy-washy is one of the jokes about that is that someone says, I'm not wishy-washy. So today I'm going to be wishy and tomorrow I'm going to be washy. Okay, so in other words, you don't know what you're actually asking for. You don't know which way you're going to go. You're constantly changing your mind, and people can't follow that. People can't make decisions across that. They're not decisive. They're not easy to follow. They're not simple. They're a word salad. So are you decisive when you're giving instructions or directions? Give yourself a grade. A good listener. A good leader will be a good listener, not just a constant talker. Giving others a platform and an opportunity to express themselves in appropriate situations helps a leader to know the circumstances of those around us. In this session, different than it would be if I was there in person with you, this session is forced to be a monologue. It's almost impossible to have a dialogue with the people in this class. So I'm forced to be the talking person. I have to be talking, and all of you are forced to be the listeners. That's all you can do basically in this class. But that's not really the circumstances that this item, this character trait is talking about. I sometimes ask people, I have asked this people, how many mouths do you have? One. How many ears do you have? Two. By definition, you perhaps should listen twice as much as you talk. We don't do that very well. It's kind of talking about that. If you do listen, are you hearing? We claim that we're listening as people are talking. This is especially like with wives. Yeah, I hear you, but we weren't listening to them. We have no idea what they just said. There's a difference in listening and hearing. Listening means that you actually heard what they said. You know what was said. You're listening on purpose. It's not just background noise. It's listening. How do you grade yourself on that? Being open-minded. A good leader keeps an open mind while also being flexible, adjusting thoughts and or a position on issues if necessary. If you're closed-minded, it means that no matter what somebody else said as you were listening, You don't agree with them. You're not going to agree with them. You're not even going to actually give them any credit or space for whatever their opinion is about something. Someone that is open-minded, and this is on a project, say, or a troubleshooting or a problem, or here we are, and we need to figure out what are we going to do next? How do we get from here to wherever we need to go? And you at least seem to have been asking, or maybe someone is volunteering a suggestion of where to go, but you're closed-minded and you're just simply not going to hear it. If it wasn't your idea, it wasn't an idea. I talk about some people when I'm trying to help them come up with an idea, come up with a way to improve something. There'll be often somebody somewhere that immediately their head starts going like this. I'm not talking about this kind of head. Just literally no. They can't help it. They just can't help it. They can tell you immediately 20 things that are the reason that that idea will not work, but they don't even have one idea or reason of what could work. But they can tell you all the reasons that don't work. They're closed-minded to whatever it is that anybody else is saying other than them, because it's not their idea. We sometimes have to get around those people by trying to suggest an idea and make them think it was their idea. Otherwise, we can't get it to go through and happen. I've worked for bosses that were that way. I've worked for plant owners that were way. I've been a consultant to companies that was the way the people that were responsible for whatever was going to happen next. I had to find a way to lead them with a series of questions so that one of the final questions asking them about this thing was going to be something that they answered and say, oh, we could do this. And that was the only possible solution that was left. They didn't even realize that I had circled it around to where that there was only one thing to pick. But because they picked it and I didn't say it first, it's their idea. So now we can do that. But if I'd have said it first, it wouldn't have worked. How do you grade yourself on that? Personal accountability. Yikes. The more you understand about this, the harder this will be for you to answer. A good leader will not only take responsibility for things that went wrong and were in error, but accountability is taking the next step to make it right. It is easy to blame other people and hold them accountable for something. It is really hard to take responsibility for something that went wrong, especially if you weren't the one responsible for it. But within an organization, within Darshan's organization, ultimately he is responsible for everything that everybody does and doesn't do. It's his responsibility, even if he didn't cause it. He's got to take it and make it right. He's got to accept the responsibility for those kinds of things. We see this in marketing when we have customers and we blame it on whatever went wrong. The customer is always right. That's a cop-out. The customer is always right unless they're completely wrong. They're not always right. And so simply taking responsibility for what the customer did that was wrong or put you in a spot that was wrong doesn't actually make it right. We have to do that sometimes. We have to just suck it up, man. But we have to take responsibility for things and then try to make it right. Your ability to and willingness to collaborate. That means work with others, get along. A good leader will take the concept of teamwork, doesn't have an I in it, and it'll take it to a higher level by collaborating with one or more people on a project or a goal. And this is most often exemplified when collaboration of team members consists of people from different value streams, different departments, etc. If any of you have done a Kaizen, that's a Japanese word for an improvement team. And one of the principles of the Kaizen is to use people that make up the team from different disciplines. And some of the best teams for an improvement project using the Kaizen principle is to have a couple of people that are on the team that really do know what's going on and they really do know about the project. They really are the most knowledgeable about something, but make sure you have somebody on there that is from, they might be a janitor. They might be someone in the office that's never been out on the floor and doesn't have a clue what this thing is that you're talking about. I've actually brought in someone's wife sometimes into a Kaizen, someone who doesn't know anything about it at all. And yet what you're trying to do is explain it to them. And in the process of explaining it to someone that doesn't know anything about it, sometimes the answers fall out because you're now getting down to a simplified level trying to explain it to someone that doesn't have the technical expertise. Collaboration is built into that type of a thing. That's the reason Kaizens actually are effective if you do them right. How's your ability to delegate and empowerment of capabilities? A good leader will include team members in decision making so that they are given participatory role in the process. And this will capitalize on their own respective expertise and judgment, which will increase their sense of individual worth. Usually for a leader, we have a term that we talk about called brainstorming. And I'm in English, it's called brainstorming. Do some of you know what brainstorming is? You at least know the word. And the idea is that several people get together and they start talking about something. Well, there's two different types of brainstorming. One of them is kind of a formal brainstorming, and the other one is informal. So if we were going to have an example of this, and I said that, okay, all these people that are in this session today, there's 25 or 30 of you, and I said, let's have a brainstorming session about time management. I would do this formally with you, and I would start with one person in the group, and I would ask you, said, what do you think is a good example of how we can improve time management? And I would get that response from that person, one thing. And then I'd go to the next person. This is formal. And I'd get one thing that that person suggests might be helpful for time management, whether it's a good example or a bad example, and go all the way around the room to everybody that is in the meeting, getting one example from them that is, in fact, something that they say that is related to time management. It might have been that I agree with Frank over here. I agree with Darshan, but there's a response from everybody. Everybody had to say something. An informal way of doing this is that I would say, okay, guys, here all of you are. Who's got something that they can say would be an example of time management? And somebody in the group, like Darshan, I mean, he's always going to speak out. He's probably the smartest one in the groups, or thinks he is. And he's just going to blurt out an answer somehow that, here's a good example of time management. I think we need to be able to do this. And the other people that are in the room that aren't so quick to think, aren't so quick, maybe not as, they're more shy. They're not going to be the one that would be blurting an answer out. They'd raise their hand and wait to be called on. If I didn't call on them, they're going to say a thing. They might have the best answer. And so by using a formal brainstorming, you can actually get the people that wouldn't normally have said anything to at least contribute. And then by going informally, now you can start talking about which of those is more important or anything else that people have. And so when you're doing this delegation and empowerment capabilities, this is starting how do you pull decision making in with your team. You don't just simply ask them, who thinks what, you get 10 people on the team, we're trying to figure out a direction. What do you think we should do? Well, there may only be one or two of them that are willing to speak up in front of anybody, as opposed to drawing out, enabling, empowering someone to be able to speak about what they might have, because they might have the best idea, but because of their personality, they may not ever get a chance or take the chance to express it. Empathy may not be a word that you know in English. I don't know. A good leader is going to make some kind of connection with people and look for ways to help them rather than focusing only on themselves. The better you understand the circumstances of others, the better you're able to empathize with them. I can't even say it myself. What do I mean by that? Maybe they have a sick child at home. It's distracting them. Maybe they don't have a way to get to work right now because they're two-wheelers. There's circumstances that happen to people that are unavoidable, that cause problems, that cause distractions. Their mother is sick and they can't go see them until there's stuff that happens. And if we are insensitive to those things, if we turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the circumstances that are around the people that we're kind of in charge of in some way, shame on us. We need to be aware. We need to make ourselves aware in some ways what it is that's affecting people, what's going on in their lives. And we're not trying to meddle into their lives. We're not trying to spy on them or anything, but at times we become aware of what's happening with us. We can tell someone that normally is fairly happy about what they're doing, but now they're sad, they're crying. There's something that is wrong, and so we should be empathetic, sympathetic with them, to at least try to understand what their circumstance is. We may not be able to do anything about it whatsoever, but just them being aware that we're aware is sometimes helpful. We certainly don't need to make it worse for them. Stoicism, not a word that probably you know, but a good leader will endure pain and hardship with little or no display of feelings or complaint. Costly mistakes, unexpected failures, or even unscrupulous enemies are not welcome, but should be anticipated in advance in order to prepare yourself for when such events occur. This is a plan ahead kind of a thing. This is a hard thing. We would like to think we never have to go through life with these kinds of things. There's no way for you to know what I'm about to tell you any more than I can be aware of what's going on in any of your lives. Last night, 24 hours ago, right now, 14 years ago, my number 2 son was killed in a car accident after he'd been in the Army. Terrible times, hard times. Every year on February the 4th at 11:55, right before midnight, it's a hard time. For me, it's a hard time. For my wife, it's a hard time. For the brothers and sisters, my other children. But we go on. It never gets better. It never gets done. Time does not heal certain things. And yet we still have to go on. We still have to do what it is that we have to do the best that we can. And sometimes we need to be aware, and we need to take note when we are aware of similar things that are happening in other people's lives. Sometimes the British say that you need to have a stiff upper lip. That's the way they look at it. Everything is that can be hurtful to us and distract us is going to be a real thing, but we can't fall apart when the company has a problem, when there's an issue, when there's a press that went down, when there's scrap that got to the customer, when we're rejected with a customer complaint or something like that. We can't fall apart. So somebody's got to be the strong one. Somebody's got to have a face for the rest of the people that do not know what to do and cannot do anything about it. We need leaders. We need people that can stand strong. We need people that in those times can be decisive. How well do you do that? Maybe you don't know because you've never had to do that. And I pray and wish that you never have to. But are you prepared for it? There's almost no way to know the answer to that. Innovative or being creative. I have a motto, a mantra that's for my life. And that is 2 simple words: be creative. I personally try to be creative in everything I do, everything I teach, every little project that I'm working on around the house. I try to be creative, innovative. Creativity is an ability to develop original ideas, thoughts. Innovation is the ability to improve on an existing idea. There's a lot more people that are innovative than creative. Some people couldn't come up with a new idea and a creative thing if their life depended on it. But given an idea, given a plan, given a process, given a thing, there are a lot of people that can make it better. They can innovate, make it better. And as a leader, you may or may not be very creative. You may or may not be very innovative. That's okay. There's only so much that you can do if you don't have that capability, but it doesn't mean that you can't look for it. It doesn't mean that you can't try. to find ways to innovate and make things better. And that may mean that you delegate the innovation to someone else and brainstorm with them, what are some ways that we can improve this? And now with those ideas in your hand and on the board and in your mind, now you become the leader for how to actually put those into practice. It's not necessarily up to you to come up with them. You can be a leader to gather them from those who have that particular skill set. Are you patient? Patience is a reality. It's a really courage. It's a courage that's meant to test your commitment to your cause. Good leaders know when to abandon the cause and when to stay on the course for the long haul. We have the joke sometimes that we say that I want patience and I want it right now. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Patience is actually learned through a trial or a tribulation, something that is going along and you're having to stay with it. And so you kind of have to have been able to go through something to gain patience. It's not just something that is given to you. There's nothing that you can do to just you can't exercise and get more patience. That's not how that works. You're going to have to go through things that require patience so that you can learn to be more patient. If you've never had a tough time in something, you probably don't have any patience and you don't even know it. But most of us, by the time you get to the age that I see that most of you are, you've had to have patience to make it through school, to work through a test, to work through the difficulties sometimes in getting a job, keeping the job, learning on the job, learning the things that are required for the job, being an entrepreneur. There's patience required to see it to the end, to actually see the results that you're hoping to find. So if you got any, that would be telling you about that. Persistence kind of goes along with the patience thing. We talk about the city of Rome. It's a famous saying, Rome was not built in a day. In fact, it took 2,000 years. I have been impressed, really impressed in my travels in India with so many of the temples and the statues and the places of worship all through the country that were started on purpose by one generation, knowing it was going to take generation after generation after generation after generation to complete it. And the people that were going to complete it weren't even born yet, but they were already committed to being able to do and finish this project. That almost doesn't exist at all in the United States. We're fast and furious, and we want it fast and right now. Nobody wants to wait for anything. We don't have projects that are deliberately generational. I'm not aware of anything in the United States that's generational being built. And that was impressive. That inspired me in India to even think like that that things could be built over generations. And that's persistence. That is a culture that is within the Indian people that I admire, and wish I was better at. I don't score well here when I do my assessment, and compared to how I think that a lot of the Indian cultures are, because there's a cultural allowance and expectation that things take generations sometimes to accomplish. Now, in a business and in the daily work of a plant and projects, we don't have time for generational projects. We got to do them a little quicker than that, but you've still got to be persistent in your expectations. You can tell somebody to do something, and you're probably going to have to tell them tomorrow too, and you'll have to tell them the next day. And you'll have to tell them the next day, and you'll probably still be doing that next year. You're going to have to be persistent until they finally get it right. Think of it as raising children. If you have children that you watch other people raise, or you've raised them themselves, just because they finally took their first step, now, okay, I do not want you to leave your toys laying around. You're going to learn patience, and you're going to learn persistence as you try to raise that child to not leave their toys scattered across the floor. It'll take some time, and that's kind of what we're talking about. Insightfulness. What is that? A good leader will have insight every day about what's really most important to accomplish and why. There's always a task. There's always something else. There's always a lot of something else to do. And probably there are more tasks and more things to do than you could possibly complete in the day or in the hour or in the moment. And therefore, you have to be on the spot and sometimes instantly sorting priorities, sorting urgencies. Certain things are more important to accomplish now than later. And we have to adjust by that, whatever it means. At the very beginning of this session in this class, I was asking about the handout of these things that we're going over right now, because I was going to have you to fill them out during the class. Unfortunately, because of my time management, I didn't get it to Darsan soon enough. And so they're not ready to be printed out during this class. And so we changed paths. I did exactly what I'm talking about here. And so Darshan and I changed paths, and those handouts will be given to you to fill out overnight, and we'll talk about them tomorrow. Like I say, we aren't going to go through these. No one's going to have to reveal their scores, because some of this would be terribly embarrassing, but you get the idea. Focus. A good leader will avoid letting the hassle of minor issues distract attention and resources away from major issues. Indian culture is not very good at this. American culture is not very good at this either, because we want things immediately. We want things on the spot. We want fast food. We want quick results. We're not willing to wait for things. And because if the phone at your table or in your pocket were to buzz, vibrate, or blink, almost every one of you is going to pick it up. You're probably going to glance over at it and see it will be a distraction, because we are tuned and trained, and we've only had these cell phones for barely over a decade, and we are already trained as a society that when it rings or dings, wait a minute, I need to take this call. No, you don't. We only think we do. We've been trained, we've been conditioned that we have to take this call. We have to see what the text was. We have to respond back right now. No, you don't. 15 years ago, there were no cell phones and no text. Nothing like that was there to distract you, or that you had to answer it right away. It didn't happen. This is a new thing. Some of you are young enough, that's all you've ever known. You've grown up with it that way. My children are that way. My grandchildren are even worse. I've got 5-year-olds that know how to use a phone better than I do. I think it's wrong, but but they do. And they're already conditioned. They will never not know having these digital things in their hands. They'll also may never have the level of interaction socially with people that we do or should have. Focus. These are taking our focus away. It is hard to stay focused because we have so many social media requirements that we can't wait to get back to them. Even if you're not bothering it right now, you know, some people said, I know that I'm probably missing. There's probably people saying things on my Facebook or on my TikTok that will take. I gotta get back. I'm missing something, and so you're not focused. You're out of focus. You're focused on the wrong things. It's hard to actually be in focus on what you're supposed to be doing, the major things, which means you have to be able to sort out what is actually most important. What is the urgent things? What are the things I need to actually do? What can I let go in order to be able to accomplish the things that I need to do? When can I let them go? That's part of focus. When you do this exercise tonight, tomorrow, whenever it is you're doing it, you'll want to total all your scores up. There's if you were to have a 5 score in every single one of these 26 items, you'd have a score of 130. If you were to score 1 on all 26 of them, you'd have a score of 26. So nobody gets 0. Everyone gets at least 26. But there's a pretty broad range of possibilities between 26 and 130. And it's not so much what your total score is. That's actually not really the litmus test here. But it is things that if you had scores and you were honest with yourself, then scores of 4 and 5 are potentially areas that you're strong in. those are skills that, those are areas that you have some good characteristics in. This is self-assessment. Those are areas that, okay, I can do this. But if you've got areas that are a score of 1 or a 2, then you're weak in those areas. You're honestly weak in those areas. And if, at least if you know about it, then those are areas that you can work on to improve. How do I improve them? Well, you can Google things about self-help. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to improve areas that are important to you. And some of those areas may not be all that important to you in your position, in your area of leadership, in your area of focus, whatever it is you do, but some of them will be. Some of them will, to be honest, will be areas that I'm terrible at this. I know I am, but I need to be better. If I want to get to the next level in my job, in my company, in my relationships, I know I got to fix this. I got to move this up into a higher ranking, however long it takes and whatever you have to do to deal with that. This is kind of like making a gap analysis about yourself. Here's where you are. Where do you want to be? That's the gap. What do you do to close that gap? Scores of 3. To be honest, that's just average. It's not good, not bad. Those are actually areas to improve too, but not the ones that are most important compared to 1s and 2s. 360 scoring assessment. If you really want to know about yourself, then if you have a 360 assessment, this is basically, okay, here's me. I'm going to assess myself, but then I'm also going to let someone that reports to me assess me with the same assessment. I'm going to let someone that I report to assess me. I'm going to let a peer, someone that's one of my peers, an equal, quote unquote, to me, assess me. Let a family member assess you. Let your spouse assess you. But there's a warning here. You will likely discover that those people do not see you the same way you see yourself. And if you can get past your own ego and your own heart out on your sleeve and the likely disappointment and shock of what other people thought about you, then you'll actually find some really good areas to improve that were different than what you might have thought about. There may be areas that you think, man, I am probably the best in the world at this, and someone else will give you a 1. It happens. And there'll be areas that, man, I'm not good at this at all, and you'll find out that everybody thought that was the best trait about you. Both of those will happen. But I don't recommend doing that if you can't handle it. It is a very abrasive to have that kind of reality check. But I also think it's worthwhile in some cases. So that's what that program will be. We will talk about what you found out about yourself tomorrow as we go through that, and I'll start here tomorrow with what I call noble traits that are worth achieving. And so we'll pick up right here and also go through your results. Like I said, we aren't going to, you don't have to share them. We're just going to talk about them as to what you have. And then I have another another presentation on culture and organizational culture that we'll get into also tomorrow. And hopefully we can get through all of it tomorrow. And if there's more about management and supervising that we can share, especially like time management, that can be scheduled for another month. I appreciate all the folks that are not Harkish Rubber people that are in on this. I hope that so far this has been informative and helpful in some way to your own personal thoughts about yourself. And again, I'm not telling anybody how to manage or how to be. I'm just telling you what I do. And I can say again, Darshan can tell you himself, if he and Jay have known me for the better part of 10 years, and I'll just ask him point blank, are the things that I've been talking about what you know about me and what you've heard about me, Darshan?
100%. Right. This is all coming from personal experience, and that is why it was so valuable. like you mentioned earlier, you have we've always looked up to you. We've known you for a very long time. And what you say is really important, and not just from the technical aspect, but from a professional aspect, how to be a better leader, how to be a better person. I was sharing the same thing with the team as well. That's why all of them are here today at 8 a.m. just to listen to you. Um, and you live each and every one of these traits that you're talking about here. And we wanted to understand more about it. So thanks and thank you for being generous enough to allow us to share this with other people that we know as well.
Well, it's my pleasure. Let's see. All right. So we'll pick this up tomorrow at my time is 9:30, whatever time that is for you. We'll just start right here. And we'll briefly talk about your test results, your pop quiz and homework, and then we'll dive into this as well. So I'll say good night, and we will see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye bye. Good night.